Hey there, hope you guys are doing well. I'm going to just hop on here really quickly and do a few tutorials on a few little things that are inside of the Death Defeated series, maybe some of the paper Wrinkle things, maybe how I built some scenes out, real kind of quick overview of how to do the things. Maybe it'll stir some ideas in your head and let you try some new things. So the first thing I'm going to try to do is talk about how to do the paper Wrinkle type of stuff, and it's not perfect or flawless, but it still kind of gives you the illusion that there's some paper wrinkling up, and it feels a little more tangible. So I'm going to cover that. I'm also going to cover maybe some falling roses and a few other things, maybe even some of the snake movement. So just a few little things to give you an inside look at how this is all working. So I'm going to just keep this project open so that we can sort of see what's going on. And we're going to cover a few things first. So really the first thing I did was pretty low budget. I took my phone and I mounted it to actually this microphone stand here, kind of pointing down, but you could maybe use anything. And I just took some overhead shots of a piece of paper, wrinkled up in stages, completely, maybe balled up. And then I'd unwrinkle it a little bit, take a picture, unwrinkle it a little bit, take a picture, and a little bit more, probably about maybe 8 to 12 times. And really it depends on how accurate or how long you want that animation to be, but I just wanted to be pretty quick and sort of stop motion esque. So, and that's really what I did. And so the way I'm gonna do that, I'm just gonna go ahead and open up Photoshop. So let's say you took a lot of pictures and you need to kind of piece those together. So I think my final looked, let me pull up the actual project here and see what I came up with. So paper animations, Wrinkle 1, so let's go with Wrinkle 2. So these are all just different stages of the actual unwrinkling process. All right, so these are actually after Photoshop, but again, the original just looked pretty basic. I just took it on top of my mouse pad so that I had a nice dark background. So that's maybe one thing that you want to do first, is have that nice dark background behind your piece of paper. But once you do that, you don't even have to have it really still. You could do it, see, this is kind of what it looked like here, and so it went slowly like that. So pretty janky, not pretty low budget, but that was sort of the speed there. So then I took that into Photoshop. So let's open up Photoshop, and I want to keep that the same screen, same size as my screen. So I'm going to do 1920 by 1080 at 300, hit create. Then I basically just brought those files in here. So I don't know if I can drag all these at one time. Let's see, there we go. And I'm just gonna hit enter a few times to lock those in. All right, so something like that. And then I'm gonna actually move these in order. Definitely want my first one on top so I can see the full animation here. This is the top one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so you got them all in order there. And so then I pretty much just blew this up. So I took all of those and highlighted them. Got my transform tool. You can do Command T, or I think you can actually, if you highlight them, you can just scale it up. So then I scaled it up all together, nice and even. And I just wanted to fill that frame completely. So something like that is kind of what I wanted to go for. Okay. From here, I think I tweaked the color, so I just added some adjustment layers. So I did a hue and saturation and turned that all the way down. Then I believe maybe I grabbed a curves or a levels. We'll just do levels for now and kind of add some more contrast to this whole thing. Something like that. And then I just started exporting these one by one. So I would do Command S and save this out as another file. So we'll just say, paper 1. And then I can turn that off. And I'm saving these actually as PNG. So then I would go into this background, because I don't really want this background on here. So I'll start to take that out. So the way I do that is, I think I use the magic wand tool. And if you click this and you try to delete it, it's probably not going to work, because it's going to say it's not editable. And that's because this is a smart object. So all you need to do is right click over here and go to Rasterize Layer. Okay, and so then I kind of start clicking through here, and you can change your tolerance level of your magic wand tool up here. That way it'll kind of recognize a few more of those colors. I have to go a little bit stronger there. There are plenty of other ways to do this. You can use like a lasso tool, even like a magnetic tool could also work well. So let's see if I can find that. Maybe even quick selection. Let's see. and I'm holding down Shift as I click through this. That actually works pretty well. So yeah, just like that right there is a good way. Then I just delete it. And if I hit Command D to deselect it, you can see now I have this transparent background on there. All right, so then I would save that as a file. And I want to keep these all sort of the same file. So if I say paper 001, paper 002, you want to make sure you keep that same sequence so that After Effects will recognize it later as a image sequence. Okay, so make my way through that again, and you can kind of go through and select all of these. Maybe this quick selection tool is not working great for this one, so let's try the magnetic tool. Let's see, it's a lasso, magnetic lasso. So you can just kind of click and drag, and it sort of recognizes your edge there. You might not get it right the first time, but that's okay. Close enough. Just do this little here. And click that last dot there and delete that. And we'll just right click on that and go to Rasterize Layer. And now I can delete that big background. All right, so you may need to clean that up just a little bit. I'm just gonna do that with the eraser tool. Clean up my corners here. This is a quick and dirty way to get these created. So you get the idea. Walk through all of those images, get rid of that background, make sure it's sort of filling your entire frame, save those as a very similar file name so that when you bring it into After Effects, it recognizes as a PNG. So if I go to After Effects, we're going to make a new folder, let's actually click this little button down here, and we'll call this paper, and I'm going to do Command I to import. And if I go to that folder, basically what happens is we're going to do that in Wrinkle, let's see, maybe Wrinkle 3. Yeah, so this one right here sort of goes in these steps. This is how it started here, which is not really what we want. I think what I did actually to get a few more steps is I would use some of these same ones, and I would just maybe move it in different spots or transform it so it looks like it has a few more frames. So I have all of these labeled just simple 1, 2, 3, 4 all the way through 9. And so if I put my mouse on top of this, I can make sure I want to select the importer JPEG sequence. I guess I did save these out as JPEGs because I'm going to use the black values as a Luma Map. So we'll have imported JPEG, so it'll bring this in as a sequence. So if I hit import, I have this little icon with a few different pieces of paper, and that will create the sequence. So now if I drag this into a composition, we'll just drop it down. Let's see, and we'll drop it right there. So now if I hit spacebar, it pieces this all together as one long sequence. All right, so this is obviously going very fast and a little bit too much. So what I want to do is I'm going to go to composition settings by right-clicking composition settings, and we'll keep this 1920 by 1080. 24 is fine. We could probably actually make that like 12 frames so it goes a little slower, but we can change that by time remapping. Now I need to change my timing, so we're going to make this like 5 seconds long. Okay, I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and here I want to right click on this, and I'm going to go to enable time remapping, and that's basically going to give me these little points where I can change the speed of this animation. So we'll push this maybe to 2 seconds, and I'm going to slide this all the way down here. So now if I hit spacebar, does sort of a stop motion vibe, just like that. Okay, so it's probably a little too slow, so I'm going to speed that up some. Okay, a little faster. All right, and I think I want my first frame to be black like that. I'm actually going to add a background, Command Y for a new solid, and we'll just make this a black background. Because if you don't have that in there, this actually isn't black, it's transparent. So we want to make sure we turn that as a black layer. There we go. So now it's all black, and it transforms to that right there. All right, so that's basically the paper fold right there. So we're going to stick to something somewhat simple as far as making something reveal on this piece of paper. So to do that, I'm going to just bring in the graphic that we have for the main series. This graphic, let's do this main graphic here. Okay, so here's our main graphic, and we will make our this will be sort of our composition that will be our sort of our main scene. So we'll just call this logo reveal. All right, 1920 by 1080. We'll do that frame rate at 24, and we'll make our length of it maybe 15 seconds. I'm gonna hit OK. So then I'm going to drag in my new paper composition right here. So we'll call this paper reveal. All right, and I'm just hitting enter to change the names of those. And so I can drag that down here. So we have our paper reveal right there. Perfect. Now we may want to extend the end of this because it sort of runs out. So I'm gonna double click on that. And we're gonna go in here and extend this. And so this is gonna stay locked on this scene since we did the time remapping. It's gonna stay right there the whole time. Okay, perfect. So logo reveal, here we go. And now I'm gonna drag in my new, really whatever this graphic is. So this could be a total, this could be another animation, this could be a video file, it could be really whatever. So actually, you know what, let's drag this, let's make a new composition, and we'll call this image, all right? And we'll hit OK. And so I'm gonna drag my main graphic into that image, and it's obviously a 4K file, so we're gonna scale that down by 50%, and I'm scaling that down by hitting S on the keyboard. I wonder if I maybe made it, let's make it a little bit bigger. Let's make it something like that. So this is good. So now we're gonna go back to our logo reveal, and now we're gonna drag in this image. And I did that so that I can easily swap out that image if I need to. So I'm gonna click and drag this down here. We'll put this on the bottom. All right, and so now I want to use this paper reveal as sort of the mat that will reveal it. And I'm probably gonna end up going back and removing this black color here. So let's take a look real quick and see what we did. So I'm gonna take the image, and now I want to use this paper reveal as some sort of mat. So I'm gonna make this a Luma Map because I want all the black values to be completely hidden. So let's try this. So I'm gonna do Luma, or someone to click on the none. And if you don't see this track mat, you can click on this toggle switches and modes button. So I'm gonna click on here. I'm gonna go to, we'll go to Luma Map first and try that. Yep, so now you can see how this is sort of coming through right here, and it's showing our background. So we probably do wanna do some sort of transparent background on that so that it doesn't do this, because it's revealing a few there's gray values, and so it's making that somewhat transparent. So in order to fix that, I think an easy way, I'm going to go into the paper reveal, and I can like turn off this background for now. Problem is our image sequence here is a JPEG sequence, and so it's going to have this black background. But I think an easy way to get rid of this, just kind of quick and dirty, is to use an extract effect. So I'm going to go to effect and keying. I think you can go to extract, and I can bump up this black point value just a little bit. I don't want to get into these grays, but I do want to get rid of this black. So I think I just bump this up just a little bit, just like that, and it pretty much gets rid of it. I want to go a little bit more and try to clean up those edges some, just like that. And I think I can maybe bump up the softness a little bit. Let's see, no, I don't want to do that. Maybe they will, no, that's probably good. So maybe now I can actually add a simple choker. So I'm going to go to effect and matte and simple choker, and let's see if I can get maybe a little bit more clean edges. There we go. So now you can see we have these nice clean edges, and it's looking pretty good versus that there. So it's looking pretty good. That kind of solves our problem, I think. Okay, perfect. So we'll go with that for now. So I'm going to go back to the logo reveal, and we want to change this from Luma Map over to Alpha. So with Luma, again, it's revealing everything that is some sort of white value and hiding everything that is a black value. But with the Alpha Map, it's going to hide anything that is transparent and show anything that actually has the image. So I'm going to do Alpha Map, and now it's a perfect sort of fold out there. Yeah, this fold is looking good now. It's nice and clean. Problem is it doesn't look wrinkly, and it doesn't look really affected by any means. It's just a simple reveal. So how do we get that paper texture on there? So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take that paper reveal and I'm going to duplicate it, Command D, and I'm going to turn that layer on. And now I'm going to use some blending modes to blend it to that background. So I'm just going to hit Shift, and plus and minus will cycle through these modes right here. But these are all just types of blending modes, and it changes the way it sort of blends together. So I'm going to do Shift plus, and I'm cycling through until I see something that I like. So you can start seeing some of this texture coming through. My best bet is probably going to be that multiply, but we can sort of cycle through the rest and see what comes out of it. But I think multiply is going to be where we want to sit on that one. Yep, so let's just go to multiply. That looks good. Okay, so as it sort of unfolds, it's got a little bit more texture to it. So the next thing I did is I had the actual image in the background sort of get affected by that paper. And so you can see all these lines are really clean and they're not really moving at all, but which wouldn't really be the case, seeing as this would be super wrinkled and all messed up. So the way I did that was I added a displacement map to our main image. So I'm going to click an image and I'm going to go to layer. I'm going to go to effect and distort. And I'm going to go down to displacement map right here. And so now I can pick a layer for it to use as the displace. And so for that, I'm going to go to where it says image. So right now it's saying I'm going to take your image layer and use that as a displacement, so you can sort of see it displaces it based on that color. But I'm going to go to image and I'm going to go to paper reveal. It can be any one of those because they're the same thing. This is looking good. So now we can start using these values here to change how it displaces it. And I think I need to maybe change this. Let's play with these values a little bit. Let's maybe move both of these to luminance since we're dealing with white and black values. And let's see what that does. Not a ton difference, but close enough. So I just do this just a little bit. So I'm going to maybe put this at like 10 and 10. Okay, something like that. And now it's sort of, you can see that text is moving back and forth, and it sort of looks a little bit like it's bent with that paper. That might be a little bit strong. So let's maybe move it to 7 and 7. Okay, and so that's looking pretty good. And I'm probably going to want to have it dial back a little bit as it gets a little still. Okay, so the way I'm going to do that is set some keyframes. So I'm going to go to the horizontal this displacement here and click these little stopwatches, and that will create a keyframe. If you click on your layer and hit U, it'll show you those keyframes right there. And so that's sort of the max we want. So I want that to stay right about there, but my animation ends about there. So we'll have it go from here to, we'll just push it down to like 1. Okay, so it's still maybe a tad bit displaced, but not a ton. So the next problem we have is that it gradually goes down and sort of shifts in a weird, unrealistic way. So for that, I'm going to just highlight these. I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to toggle hold keyframe, and that should make it pretty much just go from one to the next. Okay, so it happens pretty quick, but let's watch that back and see what happens. Okay, so it sort of looks like that paper is moving with it, which is nice. Now I can offset these just a little bit so that they're not moving at the same time. Okay, so it's not perfect, but it's fairly close. So that's looking pretty good. All right, so the next thing I needed to do was this up here is not accurate. So if the paper is unrolling, so if we go back and look at this, if this paper is unrolling, then everything back here is the back, right? So that's not really gonna show us the actual image. So the next thing I did, this was sort of a rotoscoping type of job, but basically what I did is I take this paper reveal, I'm gonna duplicate it again, and we can turn these layers off. We'll focus on this one. So now I want to basically cut out just this roll here. So this part is going to be very slow, and so I'm probably going to speed this up, but I'll go through some of it at first. So let's go to maybe the first one where it reveals out. So let's maybe come down here a little bit and see what happens. So we want to, let's start right here. Okay, so this is where we basically want to cut out everything that's sort of wrinkled up, and then we'll just have this section by itself, and it'll look more like it's unfolding. So I'm going to click on my main paper layer here, this paper reveal, and I'm sort of going to draw some pretty jagged edges around this. And this part is going to be a bit slow, just because it's sort of monotonous, but just sort of the process we have to deal with in order to make this work. So the first thing I'm going to do is hit G on the keyboard for my pen tool, and I'm going to draw just a basic edges around here. And now I can come in and start making some jagged edges for this paper. So I'm going to make these somewhat broad because these are going to change non-stop throughout this entire process, but I'm keeping it pretty much jagged the whole time, and we're just making it pretty rough for now. You can get in there if you really wanted to make it perfect and get these just right, but this is for more example's sake. And then we'll close our mask with clicking on that first point that we made. All right, so that looks pretty good. We can also go into the mask settings here and click on add and go to subtract. So it's going to take all that out. So now we have our wrinkle piece here. So we want to set a keyframe for this. So I'm going to go to the mask settings and turn on the mask path and click that stopwatch right there. And so now that's our first frame. And so I'm going to actually go back one frame until it moves a little bit. There may be a few frames where nothing happens. That's just because we use the time remap and we stretch those frames out a good bit. So now we can see that it's moved. So I'm going to double click on one of these points and that highlights my entire mask. And now I can drag this down and figure out where these points should go. So all this really looks good. We can move up some of these. So I'm going to click off of that mask again. And now I can maybe move up some of these points. But for the most part, that's exactly where we wanted to start. So we're going to move forward a frame. Okay, so I'm going to double click on all of this here and just move this up. This is pretty close. So now we can fine tune these points. So you want to work your way through this entire thing, cutting out where these go. And you may need to click and move some of these points to see what's going on with this paper, but this is about right here. And again, this is going to go very fast, so it does not have to be perfect. You can make it perfect, but you'll need a lot of time. In hindsight, I probably would have used some sort of different piece of paper where the background was a different color so that I could just key out that background. But that's sort of hindsight there. All right, so we're going to keep moving a few frames. And from here, I'm going to speed up the process. But again, you move a keyframe, change your mask to match the rollout piece here. And then we will pick up once I get all this part done. All right, so I got my keyframes done, so I'm going to play this back and see what happens. All right, so we can see it sort of moves and does its own thing, but the problem is it's not quite right. It's not really moving with the paper, and that's because these keyframes are trying to, between here, the keyframes are moving from one place to the next, but this is more of a stop motion. And so in order to fix that, we need to make sure that these are set to toggle hold keyframes. So I'm going to click and I'm going to click and drag to select all of these. And I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to toggle hold keyframe. So it's more of a step motion, and it should follow that wrinkle process there. Okay, so let's play that back. All right, so that should be the back of the paper the whole time as it unrolls. And so now let's turn this solo, add this solo load, so I'm going to turn that back off. And now I have my paper here, but I need to make sure that this is not set to multiply. So I'm going to go to where it says multiply. I'm just going to put that back to normal, I believe. And so now it kind of looks like it's unrolling that piece of paper. And obviously the edges aren't quite perfect, but you get the idea. So I'm going to play that back and see what it looks like. All right, so now we're getting somewhere. So let's kind of play that back again. That's looking pretty good. All right, so it gives the illusion that that is an actual piece of printed paper. And gives you that effect right there. So for the series, I did basically that for most of the animations in order for it to give you that vibe right there. Okay, so let's go through something else and talk about how to do a few of these other things. So in one of the scenes, we have some falling roses here, so we'll just talk how to do that really quick. It's pretty simple. So if we look back at scene one, really it's sort of the same thing over and over again. So we have this paper sort of reveal, and then the same thing is happening with the text piece of paper as well as the Jesus image in the background. They're sort of unrolling the same way to give you that same effect. And these aren't perfect just because it's happening so fast. I didn't do all of that process, but especially with that one that rolls out, it just really worked well to do that sort of cutout. So for scene one, There's really not a whole lot more to talk about with this scene except for these roses, so we'll talk about how to do that. So what I did, I believe I found this rose image on rawpixel.com. Let me see if I can find the original. So the original is right here, so I'm going to right click on that and go to open that with Photoshop. And so from here, I think I just cut out this background, so do Command J to duplicate that. Don't need that old one anymore. And now I think I can, I sort of had to paint this out to get it just right, because if I try to do a magic wand, there's so much white and it sort of blends here that I had to go in and cut those edges out nice and neat. So once I had it cut out, I ended up with the stem and this other small rose, as well as the rose head. That way I could sort of animate. I'd sort of just cut this rose out by itself. That way I could maybe animate that one just a little bit by itself by sort of moving it like that. But just using your eraser tool, going through and getting this nice and neat on these edges here was a little bit of a time killer, but it actually turned out okay. And then I actually added some, so if this is the original, I added some levels to just bump up the contrast there on that entire image. All right, so that was pretty much it, and that gave me these two images here. We don't need to go into having those separate. You can just save that out as a PNG. Just make sure you have that transparent background. I also separated it too, so I could have that red on top of this image reveal in another project. But you could actually double click on that rose top if you've separated it and do a color overlay, and maybe we can do like a multiply, and you can change that to like a bright red or something like that. Okay, so that's basically it. So then save that out as a PNG, and we'll go back into After Effects. So down here we have some falling roses. You can see, so this is sort of my main falling roses scene right here. Okay, and so the way I did this was these are actually the same composition duplicated and sort of moved in Z space a little bit. So if I go to my active camera and go to the left, you can see I have a bunch of rose compositions there just moving back and forth. Okay, but first I just made one composition of a rose falling. So if I double click on one of these layers, I'll show you what I've got going on. So I have my rose, and I basically have it falling from the top to the bottom, just like that. And in order to do that, let me just make a new composition. I made a nice long big composition, so I'm going to click on new comp, and we'll make this something like the width can be pretty small. Let's go with like 350, and my height will be something like 3500, maybe something like that. And our time, 15 seconds is probably plenty, but we'll just do a little bit more. And so now I have a nice long composition here, and I'm going to bring in my rose. Let me find that in here. These are my two pieces to my rose. I'm going to connect my top of the rose to the stem of the rose, and now I can hit S on the keyboard and scale that down just like that. And if you wanted to add some color to that rose top, we can add a tint just like here. Change our white values to like that red value, I think would actually work. All right, so that's pretty bold red. We'll cut that back a little bit. And that's pretty much it. So I'm going to turn this onto, now we can see we have a nice long composition with our rose. And I think I actually connected this to a null object, but you don't really have to do that. We can take the rose and have it fall down just like this. So the first thing I want to do is take my rose all the way to the top out of the frame, and we can hit P on the keyboard for position and click on a little stopwatch there. I'm going to fast forward all the way to maybe like 20 seconds here, and then I'm going to click and drag this all the way to the bottom. All right, so we can play that back just to see what our speed is like. And you can see that's the speed it's falling. It's probably a little bit fast, so you may even want to spread that out even farther to get it to go a little bit slower. But you get the idea. So from here, then I can take my rotation tool. So I'm going to hit R on the keyboard for rotation. Click on that stopwatch. Actually, I want this keyframe to be back at the beginning. And we can have it just do a small rotation, something like that. Okay. So it's just going to slowly rotate. Pretty simple. Okay, so from that point, I would go into make another composition. Close all these folders down. So we'll make another composition, and we'll call this Falling Roses. And we want this to be 1920 by 1080. and 25 seconds is fine. That's all good. Hit OK, and we'll drag in our new rose composition here, which sits right there, right? There it goes. Okay, so at this point, I just take this rose and I'm going to actually make this a 3D layer by clicking this button here. And now I can duplicate it with Command D, and now I can click and drag this, make sure I get my cursor right on top of that Z axis, and then I can push this sort of in Z space and just randomly move these around. So I also want to change some of the timing just so they're not all exactly the same. And I can duplicate that again, maybe move it over here. And I could also right click and go to transform and flip horizontal so that it's not exactly the same, facing the same way. And you could also go in and make more of these rose compositions by changing the, the angle of the rotation or the speed, and then bring those into this composition. But you basically, just making 3D layers, and then we want to move them in space so that they are sort of falling on their own, just like that. So we'll throw in one more just for kicks, and maybe we'll push this way to the front. Okay. So this is passing a little bit too close, so I'm going to maybe slide this way. Let's go this way. Push that one more that way. So just wanted to keep a nice even space there. All right, so you basically do that same thing and get as many roses as you want to. From there, I created a null object. So I'm gonna go to Layer, Null Object, and I wanna make that a 3D layer. And so this is sort of gonna be my pretend camera. And so I'm gonna link all of these compositions to that null object. So I click on all those, use this little pick whip, drag it up here. And now I can take this and have it sort of push in so it looks like I'm sort of traveling through the roses. So I'm going to hit P on the keyboard to set that keyframe. Actually, I want this to be the beginning. There we go. Drag forward here. Let's go with that just as an example. So now I'm going to take my Z position of my keyframe, or my position, and push it forward. So I can click and just drag this number to the left, or I can use this axis here and slide that forward like that. You can hold down Shift and it'll go a little faster. So if I play that back, once these roses come into frame, the camera should be getting closer to them. And it's kind of hard to tell, but if you had a whole lot more of these, so if I just duplicated these and maybe slid these down this way, now we can sort of get a sense of moving forward. All right, so that's basically the gist of how this scene worked. So I'll go back to scene one. We have our roses falling down. And then I took one layer, I believe it's just maybe one of these layers here. It's really the same layer, duplicated as you can see there. And one is just pushed a lot closer to the screen. And I added some blur to it so it looks like it's sort of out of focus from the camera, just to give it a little bit more of a realistic depth vibe. All right, so that sort of covers that scene. We'll go through one more thing. Let me go back to my preview controls and take a look at all the scenes here. The other piece of this that is fairly different is the snake and how it's sort of moving around. It's not really accurate, but it just sort of gives a nice animated vibe for that. So let's take a quick look at that and we'll go through how we did that. So I think that's scene number 2. So let's open up scene 2. Here we go right here. All right, so if we play this back, actually let me solo that snake out so we can see it. All right, so if I play this back, you can see that snake is sort of slithering, if you will. Okay, it's very, very subtle, but gives you just enough of a vibe that snake is alive. So the way I did that is took that snake layer, again, that was from Raw Pixel as well. I believe it is. Let's take a look and see if I can find the original. This is the original here. So again, just cut that out from Raw Pixel to just have the background there. And so that gives me this image here. And so I can drop this into a new composition. So now I have this snake layer. not moving. So now what I want to do is add, we want to use the puppet tool in order to move this thing around a little bit. So I'm going to put my playhead at the very beginning, and now I want to use the puppet tool. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about the puppet tool because it's there's a lot of features on it and little things you can tweak to make it perfect, but I'm not a pro at it. I know just enough to make things move a little bit. So the puppet tool is up here, this little pin option here. I'm going to click on that. And you have a few different options. I'm not going to go into many of these because honestly I don't really know what they do exactly, but I'm going to go to really just this position tool here. All right, and so now we sort of want to click where our joints would be, and a snake doesn't really have technical joints, but we want to just pick out a few spots. So I do want this little spot to move here, so I'm going to click where this pin is. So when I first click, I think it's going to take a second for it to guess as where your mesh should go for your snake. So let's click and just give it a second to figure it out. So there we go. So once it does that, now we have an idea of where the snake is. And this is because this is a PNG layer, so this is the only thing that it can really find, which is a lot more beneficial for making this thing move. So now I'm going to click through and just keeping it right down the center here. I don't want to make a ton, but just maybe a few points. That mesh will update as we go. But this will just give you an idea how this works. Okay, so somewhere like that, and we'll come down maybe here, 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 and here. All right, so now we have all these little points, and so down on my layer, if I hit U on the keyboard, I should see a whole bunch of keyframes, and these are all the pins inside of my on my puppet. So now I want to move maybe to second number 2. And now we can go and move these points that we made all around. So I think I need to click on this mesh again to get those points to show up. And now I can click and move these. So I don't want to put any more pins on here. I just want to move these. So I'll put my cursor right on top of those pins. I can move this a little bit here. And just kind of move it just like a little puppet. And mine was pretty much just random. Okay, so I can go maybe to second number 4. And we're going to basically go backwards. You can see it's sort of slithering around a little bit. And there's ways to, you can see that his tongue isn't really moving the right way. I believe there's ways to use some of these other tools like the starch tool and things to sort of lock that into place with the tool. But again, I haven't really gone into that too much, so you just may need to mess around with that some. But these are just the basics. So now that that's kind of rendered, we can watch that back and you can see it moving around a little bit. Now one thing I did was sort of move these points around a little bit so they're not all transforming exactly the same way. So I may take like a chunk of them and maybe slide them down this way, slow some of them down, just really kind of randomize these a little bit so that they don't all move exactly the same. That just gives it a little bit more of an organic vibe. That's basically it. So from there, I took that into that scene number 2, broke that into some pieces so that it feels like a really big snake. And you can see here, the snake is the same snake, but now it feels like it's sort of wrapping around this whole scene way over here. And that's really it as far as using the puppet tool. So there are obviously a bunch of other techniques we could go through in this video, but really a lot of it is using that paper wrinkle, using 3D layers and 3D cameras, which we can get into another time. But those are really the ones that are sort of specific to this project that I thought might be interesting and helpful to learn. So that'll do it for today. I hope that was helpful. I hope you learned something and you can apply it to some future projects. Thanks a lot. Bye.